Hi, I'm Callie Lewis. It's December 23rd, the 3rd anniversary of Geek Brief TV, and this is our story. First, the backstory. Long ago, before the bubble burst, the internet bubble, not the housing one, Neal and I were freelance web developers. He did the design and I did the code. There was a cable channel called ZDTV that later became Tech TV. We kept it on all the time while we were working, kind of like the way some people keep a news channel on all the time. Tech TV introduced us to Leo Laporte, John C. Dvorak, and Patrick Norton. There were others, but those three guys are the ones who inspired us, and then the bubble exploded. I'm sure it was like what some people are going through now, post-housing bubble. Web dev jobs dried up. We racked up about $30,000 in credit card debt just to survive, and when we had had enough, we got a day job. Neal and I will have been married 10 years in January. When we got married, we made it a goal to always work together. There aren't a lot of jobs where you work for someone else that make that easy to do. We drove past a self-storage facility with a sign out front that said, "Hiring husband and wife teams." We stopped, applied, and before we knew it, we were working for a company called Extra Space Storage. We were burned out on tech. We were writing a novel. It was an easy job, and the company treated us extremely well. Before we barely noticed, we worked there for 5 years, moving around and opening new stores for them. In July 2005, Neal heard Adam Curry being interviewed on NPR. Adam was talking about podcasting. I didn't have a TV in my house growing up, so I didn't know Adam Curry from MTV. And when Neal started telling me Adam said this and Adam said that, I thought he had joined a cult. Then Neal played an episode of the Dawn and Drew show for me, and I fell in love with the concept of podcasting. Dawn and Drew, a young couple who live in a farmhouse in rural Wisconsin, were doing a show from their house and building a worldwide audience. Adam Curry was doing a show from his house and building the business of podcasting. We wanted in, and when Dawn and Drew announced that Drew was quitting his day job so they could do the show full-time, we decided that's what we wanted to do. Around the time Dawn and Drew went full-time, Steve Jobs announced an iPod that played video. There wasn't much video content in iTunes at first, and we saw an opportunity. Our goal was to get a show in iTunes by Christmas. Everyone always says, podcast about what you love. We love each other, our dogs, martinis, movies, Jesus, and technology. From that list, tech seemed to be the thing with the highest likelihood of commercial success, and since we read gadget blogs every morning before work, we decided we would create a video version of our favorite gadget blogs. There was a problem though. Not only had I never been on camera before, Neal had never produced a video, and in fact, we didn't even own a camera. One morning on Daily Source Code, Adam Curry talked about a guy named Lucian who was producing a show called Daily Planet TV using an application called Wirecast. It gave him the ability to shoot live on a green screen and do a show that looked pretty darn professional. Verasoft, the company that developed Wirecast, also makes an app called VideoQ Pro. It was less expensive and included teleprompting functionality. We bought that, 4 pieces of green poster board to make a green screen, a cheap DV camera, an expensive shotgun microphone, and an iMac. We already had a soft light Neal used for photography. As soon as we came up with the right name, we were ready to go. GoDaddy.com is a Geek Brief sponsor, but we used them to register domain names long before we had promo codes GB1, GB2, or GB3. On November 30th, 2005, we were on GoDaddy.com typing in domain names. Since we were doing a gadget news show, we had Inspector Gadget in our thoughts. We typed in a bunch of names, but when one of us typed in the name GeekBrief.com, we knew that was the one. With that name came a flood of ideas, including a cheesy Geek Brief backstory. Geek Brief would be the daily news briefing originating from the Geek Intelligence Agency, the GIA. I would be the international director, and my job would be to issue the daily briefing about the latest gadgets for agents in the GIA. Until we actually shot and watched the first brief, we thought the show would appeal almost entirely to guys. The first episode was meant to be wholesomely risque, kind of like how Johnny Carson was so good at double entendre. After we watched it, though, we thought there was a potential to appeal to women in addition to men, so there's a pretty big difference between Brief 1 and Brief 2. Now, we were conflicted when we started. We had the clear intention of quitting our day job to do Geek Brief full-time 2 months before we started the show. We wanted the first episode to go out in time for Christmas so all the people who got new iPods could subscribe in iTunes. At the same time, we had no experience in video production, so we really didn't think the audience would grow until we figured out what the heck we were doing. Enough people started watching right away that we were shut down by our hosting company just 3 weeks after we started. 5 months to the date that we released the first episode of Geek Brief, we announced we were quitting our day jobs to do the show full-time. In order to keep the brief in Geek Brief, that part of the story will be continued tomorrow. I'm Callie Lewis. Thanks for watching.
All I ever wanted on my Christmas morning was you.
I can't believe I'm hot.